Hey Vertical Kids! We're glad you joined us today as we continue our Easter devotional through the book of Matthew. So if you're following along at home, you can grab your Bibles and open up to Matthew chapter 26, and we're going to start reading in verse 47. You guys there?
Yep.
Okay. While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I kiss is the man. Seize him." And he came up to Jesus at once and said, "Greetings, Rabbi." And he kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you have come to do." Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled that it must be so?" At that hour Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But this has all taken place that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples left him and fled. So yesterday we learned that Jesus had taken the Passover meal with his disciples. And after they had finished eating, Jesus had gone to a garden to pray. When Jesus was finished praying in the garden, Judas arrived with a crowd of soldiers and officials. As they came, Jesus asked them who they were looking for. "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. Now in John's Gospel, the book of John, when he tells this story, he says that when Jesus replied, telling the soldiers who he was, they fell to the ground. At the mention of his name, the soldiers who had come to arrest Jesus were knocked back. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? As the soldiers were getting back up on their feet, Judas approached Jesus and kissed him. That was the signal that he had arranged to betray the Lord. When the soldiers stepped forward to arrest Jesus, Peter, one of his disciples, pulled out his sword and cut off the ear of the high priest's servant. Jesus told Peter to put the sword away. Then, turning to the crowds, he asked, "Why did you come at me with clubs and swords? You have seen me teaching in the temple many times." But Jesus knew that this was happening to fulfill what the prophets had spoken of him years before. The soldiers grabbed Jesus and led him away, and his disciples, the men that he had poured out his time into for years, ran away from him. The worst was still to come. But all of this suffering, all of the terrible things that were happening to Jesus, was all a part of God's plan. Jesus could have called down thousands of angels to help him, but he didn't. Even though he had done nothing to deserve his arrest, Jesus let the soldiers take him without fighting. He knew he had come to die. So today, for our craft, you guys can pull out your day 4 bag, and you'll find a template of a sword. And you're going to cut out all the pieces, so there's the front of the sword and the back of the sword and the front and back of the handle of the sword. And then you'll cut out this rectangle right here, and it says, "Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, you did not arrest me. Put your sword back in its place." So once you've cut all those pieces, you're going to glue the front of the sword to the back of the sword, and you're going to glue each of these pieces down here in the white spots where you see it right there. And then take this rectangle, and you're going to accordion fold it and glue it onto the sword so it looks like this. So when it's all folded up, it'll just say, "Put your sword back in its place." And when you open it, can you open it for me, Isaiah? It'll show a picture of Jesus teaching in the temple. So we'd love for you guys to join us at home and make your own sword to remind you that Jesus did not fight and allowed himself to be arrested because he had come to die in your place. And make sure you post pictures or videos of you doing this craft so we can see how you are celebrating Easter along with us. We'll see you tomorrow.
Don't look right here. Don't